Nikolai Fyodorov, born in 1829 as the illegitimate son of Prince Pavel Gagarin and a serf mother, spent his life navigating the fissure between Russia's feudal past and its modernizing present. That biographical tension, aristocrat by blood, peasant by law, fed the conviction that all distinctions among humans, including the absolute divide between living and dead, must be overcome through a single, planet-wide common task. While teaching provincial gymnasium classes in the 1860s, he began drafting notebooks that fused orthodox eschatology, Newtonian cosmology, St. Simon's techno-utopianism, and folk piety. In 1868, he secured employment as a night librarian in Moscow's Rumiantsev Museum. There, surrounded by maps of Siberia, monographs on galvanism, and relics of medieval saints, he elaborated a philosophy so audacious that friends copied the pages by hand rather than risk ridicule in print. Fyodorov's project of universal resurrection rests on two axioms. First, the gospel promise that every person shall rise bodily at the end of time is not a miracle to be passively awaited, but a scientific duty to be consciously fulfilled. Second, the material universe is morally unfinished. It will remain an inert desert unless humanity, acting as nature made self-aware, transforms planets, suns, and eventually entire galaxies into hospitable environments for the billions who have ever lived. From that premise followed a program both mystical and rigorously technological. Collect all biographical traces of the deceased, master genetics to reconstitute their bodies, develop psychophysical methods to restore memory and personality, and launch spacefaring expeditions so the resurrected generations will have room to flourish without exhausting Earth's biosphere. He spoke of engineering the weather to prevent droughts, redirecting rivers to irrigate deserts, and constructing air railways of orbiting platforms where families could reunite in peace with ancestors long removed from earthly turmoil. His contemporaries regarded such claims as a hybrid of apocalyptic folklore and Jules Verne fantasy. Yet Fyodorov's disciples sensed deeper possibilities. The young schoolteacher Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, after visiting Fyodorov in 1883, recast multistage rockets as vehicles of resurrection, calculating escape velocities not for military advantage, but to seed life among the stars. The mineralogist Vladimir Vernadsky, another reader of Fyodorov's manuscripts, translated the idea of conscious cosmic stewardship into the scientific concept of the noösphere, a planetary envelope of thought that guides geochemical evolution. Even early Soviet biocosmists, materialists who repudiated Fyodorov's religiosity, borrowed his slogan, "Death is a technical problem," when funding cryonics laboratories in the 1920s. Today, a century after Fyodorov's death in 1903, his agenda no longer reads like metaphysics dressed in engineering metaphors. The Human Genome Project has mapped the hereditary code he imagined scientists would one day retrieve from cemetery dust. CRISPR and prime editing hint at repairing age-induced mutations. Connectome research explores whether personal memory can be digitized and reimplanted, and de-extinction projects incubate mammoth embryos in elephant wombs, a crude rehearsal for reviving Homo sapiens long departed. On the planetary scale, SpaceX rehearses rapid reuse launch vehicles while NASA's Lunar Gateway and China's Tiangong Station pursue permanent outposts. early iterations of the cosmic museum where future resurrected citizens might reside. Climate engineering proposals, from stratospheric aerosol injection to carbon capture gigaton plants, echo Fyodorov's call to tame weather and entropy for universal welfare. What seemed to 19th century critics an extravagance now shades into plausible roadmaps. DNA libraries refrigerated in Arctic vaults, whole brain emulation forecasts measured in decades, asteroid mining feasibility studies filed with the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. The moral horizon, however, remains as daunting as Fyodorov predicted. If resuscitation of the dead becomes technically feasible, whose remains will qualify first? Those with preserved tissue samples, those holding citizenship in funding states, or everyone regardless of historical grievance? How will resurrected populations integrate into societies already strained by automation and climate migration? Fyodorov anticipated these dilemmas and insisted that technology without a unifying ethic would only magnify injustice. Therefore, the resurrection must be cooperative, transparent, and planetary in scope, or it will degenerate into neo-pharaonic privilege. Critics then and now argue that the philosophy underestimates thermodynamic limits and overestimates human solidarity. They observe that feeding 10 billion living humans sustainably is already difficult without adding tens of billions of resurrected ancestors. Fyodorov responded in notebooks that energy abundance lies in the sun and ultimately in galactic processes yet untapped. The bottleneck is organizational, not physical. He envisioned schools where children learned orbital mechanics alongside the Beatitudes, believing that technical competence and moral devotion must be educated together. His confidence may strike modern readers as naive, but current discussions around planetary-scale solar arrays, nuclear fusion, and interstellar probes reveal that the energy ceiling keeps receding under engineering pressure, much as he forecast. Fyodorov's legacy survives in unexpected forms. Russian Orthodox theologians cite him when debating whether genomic medicine can be a form of divine synergy. Silicon Valley transhumanists name him among the earliest visionaries of radical life extension. European ethicists studying digital remains recognize his insight that memory, identity, and material substrate are entwined. Preserving social media archives begins to look like the first step of his total biographical museum. Even the speculative economics of long-termism, assigning moral weight to trillions of potential future lives, echo his insistence that the dead and unborn belong inside the same moral calculus as the living. For Fyodorov, the true revolutionary was not Marxist proletarian, but a coming federation of scientists, engineers, artists, and farmers united by filial piety toward every ancestor. He imagined public works projects on a civilizational scale, reviving extinct languages so resurrected speakers could converse, terraforming Venus to house Paleolithic tribes comfortable with humid heat, converting Martian moons into mausoleums where resurrected soldiers of every war might meet without the memories of enmity. Such images hover between prophecy and blueprint. Their technical hurdles are enormous, yet each decade closes part of the gap. As neural lace interfaces inch toward brain-computer symbiosis and biofoundries print bespoke organs, Fyodorov's voice grows less anachronistic and more cautionary. He warns that piecemeal innovation detached from a universal ethic risks magnifying separations between those who receive life-extending therapies and those left to ordinary mortality. To prevent that fracture, he prescribes a governance model anchored in what he called regenerative justice, policies calibrated not only to equal opportunity among the living, but to restitution for the dead. Whether emerging global institutions can scale such an ethos remains uncertain. Yet the accelerating convergence of biotechnology and astroengineering ensures that the questions he raised can no longer be quarantined in philosophy seminars. Hence, Fyodorov endures not merely as a Russian curiosity, but as an intellectual time capsule from a future that is now arriving. His manuscripts, once dismissed as mystical doodlings in a museum basement, outline dilemmas that CRISPR labs, launch complexes, and longevity startups will soon face in concrete form. If humanity succeeds in extending healthy lifespans, resurrecting viable genomes, or settling orbital habitats, the practical question will echo his spiritual one. Will we treat those breakthroughs as private luxuries or as steps toward an all-inclusive common task? In compelling us to ask that, Fyodorov proves uncannily contemporary, an uncredentialed librarian who peered across centuries and sketched the moral ledger for technologies whose prototypes are taking shape today.